Live and direct. Any questions from the reading, last lecture, world?
Is that stapler in here?
Theoretically. No. Do you know the fold corner technique?
I do.
Okay.
I've used it a lot.
All right.
It's kind of tricky though, I think.
So, no questions?
Yeah, sometimes he doesn't understand. Oh, thank you.
All right. On the way here, I was thinking of an extra credit assignment for you. And it goes like this. The word, the Greek word diagnosis first of all, let's look at gnosis, which means to know. So if somebody's religiously agnostic, they don't know. All right? So when a medical professional uses ICD-9, which is a book of medical conditions, if a psychologist or psychiatrist uses DSM-4R, which is psych diagnoses as well as addictions, right? And they're basically reading a range of symptoms and then applying to you. So those of you who have psych diagnoses, who may or may not be on meds or know people who are on meds, et cetera, all right? So di means two. So if you look at then diagnosis, you mean two don't know? Is that what that means? Oh, okay. So if two don't know in a counseling or medical relationship, well, two don't know, both of you don't know, one of you does know, right? I'm not playing word games here. I'm just noticing what happens in the relationship when somebody comes to me with a psych diagnosis and I'm on these meds and I'm bipolar and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, great. I know what that means from Western psychology because my degrees are in psychology. So what does that mean? Well, no, they don't know. They haven't been explained what their diagnosis means in a way that makes sense to them. All right? And so if the problem is going to be, if the solution is going to be meds, how are the meds helping you? They don't necessarily give them that information either. Or like what the meds are doing to them. Okay, how are the meds stabilizing you and what are the side effects? You actually have the right, the legal right to know that in advance. Well, I'm thinking of switching from these meds to this other med. Okay, and I said, read the patient insert before you do that. Well, why? I said, I ethically cannot tell you not to take your meds. You do have the right to know what your meds will do and what the upside and the downside of the therapy is before you begin the therapy. You didn't know that? Well, you do. Right? So I'm basically doing consumer education here, right? Should be. And I'm not arguing off your meds. I'm just saying, okay, there's a way to achieve the goals with the meds, without the meds. But before you can go off your meds, you need to have the skill to be able to negotiate your world and all the stuff that's happened to you. So remember what I said in the three previous classes we've had. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. Okay? And the reason that's so is that if you went through an insane situation, or you're living in an insane situation and society has not prepared you for that insane situation, how are you supposed to make a normal adjustment? Like Prozac really going to help you adjust normally? Not necessarily by itself, because remember, pills are not skills. All right, so your extra credit assignment. So we talked about pain, loss, and fear, PLF, pain, loss, and fear, depression, anger, serenity. I want you to write down as an extra credit assignment what you want to get out. One, what you want to get out of this class. What brought you here? What brought you here and what you want to get out of this. Because I'm working off of what's called adult learning theory. Adults want to learn stuff that they can apply to their lives now, practically. Not that's going to be of use later, but now. Yeah, I may be training for a career, but I want to know something that works for me now. Right? Because when civilians were taking the pro class, it was not that they want to become pros. They want to understand what this, how did I get into this, how did I survive being in this family and then going into these relationships that I'm replicating my family in. And I keep going through this cycle of, okay, you're going through this cycle because, well, there's lots of different ways of explaining why that is. But it's not what's wrong with you. What's wrong with me? It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. And getting out of it might take skill. Like if you're in quicksand, okay, you're floundering makes you go down in the quicksand more. You're going to have to breathe deeper, not just breathe deeper, but take a look at what your circumstances in and apply the correct healing method to get out of it. Whether or not you get into a healing relationship with a professional. In fact, doing this will actually help you with a professional. Any professional. So, diagnosis. 2 don't know, and 1 should know. Yes?
On this extra credit, how long do you want it to be?
Standard, page 2, however long enough to cover the subject, short enough to be interesting.
So it's what?
So, for example, all right? This isn't media. We're on television, but, right? I was taught when you're going to use the media to teach people, you have to do like sound bites because it's television. So if you can't conceptualize the problem in 25 words or less, you probably don't know what the problem is. You might be able to know, but you should be able to bring it in 25 words or less as a discipline to be able to explain it. And explain what the issues are. So, going back, the idea, the class intends to infuse substance abuse prevention technology to the general populace in such a way that it enables lay people to become proficient in the basics. So an apt analogy would be the technique of brushing your teeth for 2 minutes. You're supposed to do it from 2 minutes. My electric toothbrush, every area stops every 30 seconds and move on so that you're covering all areas, and then you're supposed to floss after that, right? Like we do that. But that's the technique, right? So, basic principles of self-care, which when practiced, avoid most substance abuse problems. Now, the substance abuse field expanded way beyond substance abuse a long time ago to cover lots of stuff. And we're preventing problems. So you might not even be addicted or strung out, but you might be codependent because you're in an active relationship with addicts, or were raised by addicts, or any number of things. So basic principles of self-care, which includes self-awareness. So self-care is culturally bound. That is, it provides a culturally competent, so since self-care is culturally bound, it is culturally specific. So for example, you cannot do pregnancy prevention unless you have a culture that can talk about sex and sexuality and access to barrier methods. Globally, the spread of AIDS is directly linked to where women have access to barrier methods and can not only say no, but can say, I am going to use no glove, no love. And can get away with that without, fatal or violent consequences. Wherever they don't have that access, AIDS spreads, just as an example, right? So we got Planned Parenthood here, among other things. All right? So your culture has to be able to support prevention or health promotion. So, providing culturally competent, culturally proficient framework for what constitutes healthy behavior counters the generic mainstream approach which actually promotes substance abuse by ignoring cultural protective factors. So what I've also made clear is that you have to look at the fact that living in mainstream American culture predisposes you to substance abuse. Mostly because major addictions are supported throughout our society. Because people make money from it. And they want you to consume. Without thinking about it, without questioning. So the original class, this is from the original class proposal. Some of this made it into the syllabus, but most people skip over that. So I used to talk about a cultural offensive, like this was kind of like a war and all that kind of stuff. I've since changed that to say, I don't have to fight against the oppressor. I can be more human than the oppressor. Then there's no fight. I can basically say, y'all are crazy, but I don't have to be crazy with you. I can be saner than you are and not have to say anything. So, it's not a war per se. The adversary wins by having you be strung out on the things that make you weaker and them more profitable. So, this is less about than a war than making you more human than your adversary. So some of us were more human before we became Americans. So for those of us who were born Americans, our health demands we become more than consumers, but self-healers, which America does not teach us to do. Not even in the concept. Notice that? Oh, you can't heal yourself. You need to go to this professional, which may be true sometimes. But what if we created a society where you knew what to do to heal yourself? So we move from being addicts, codependents, through recovery towards being fully human. Which is not to say that an addict isn't fully human, but they're in pain. So in a sense, we are a guerrilla movement. Sorry, I recruited you. There it is. So, it's not so much watch your back, but watch your breath as a basic skill. Watch your breath. So, culture affects everything we do. Culture shapes individuals, and individuals shape culture. So, assume your full humanity and live free. If you think about your ground of being, that is your feelings, your emotions, your mind, leave out the weeds, cultivate that which makes you strong. Now, a weed may actually be something that you don't know what the use is for. I allow dandelions to live in my lawn because they can be a useful plant if I want to use the greens or whatever, but mostly I don't. They're decorative. But I don't use weed killers. Just pull weeds out. So, till your ground of being, leave out the weeds, cultivate that which makes you strong. Resistance to the larger addictive culture is the secret of joy, and joy is the secret to resistance. Them's that laughs last. Cultivate some humor. So this person, the internet, when you Google this, you look for, it's called dancing slave, and the person isn't actually a slave. They're free. They're a maroon, which is the native word for a African and Native American first generation mix. And the word maroon means wild and free. So even though the picture is identified as a dancing slave, it's like, well, slaves don't usually have guns. So he's already free, and he's dressed for the weather. So as I've talked about before, addiction is slavery, and slavery is profitable. But in order to free yourself from slavery, you have to know more than the slaver. You have to also understand how you are enslaved. Because how they keep you on the plantation is by putting chains on your mind. Like you're dependent on them instead of being free. So you have to free, like Morpheus says in The Matrix, free your mind. As my grandma used to say, free your mind and your behind will follow. So slavery is profitable, and ignorance promotes slavery. Knowledge alone can't buy you freedom. You actually have to work for it and constantly reinforce it. So you have to practice and protect your freedom. Okay? So the practice of freedom begins with knowing what makes you strong. All right, so when I talk about it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you, you need to be able to think about what happened to you, what the pain was, what did you lose? And therefore, what are you grieving? Because you might not even be in awareness about that you're grieving something, that you've lost something. Because usually what happens when we're grieving, we focus on the loss, but not what's left. And we feel bad about what's lost, and that's okay to feel bad about what's lost, but you also need to focus, move through that, feel it fully, and then what have I got left? What's left? And build from there. You're still alive, you still have breath. Okay? You still have a mind, you still have a heart, you still feel. Your emotions are often an indicator of where you should move next. All right? So, knowing what makes you strong. So, surviving a horrific experience, okay, you survived, you're still here. You're not destroyed. You may feel emotionally devastated, but you're not destroyed. So, the natural condition of human beings is freedom. So the maroon was once a slave. He or she stripped themselves of the parts of civilization that prevent them from being in touch with their environment. Not only their natural environment, but their emotional environment. Salt peanuts and salt nuts are my drug of choice to distract myself from being exhausted. Coffee, too. Okay? They're an easy way out instead of exercising, which is what I should be doing. Hydrate, exercise, then I don't feel tired anymore. Right? So being in touch with your environment. There is somebody was telling me about nature deprivation syndrome. Like you're not getting out in the sun enough. You're not walking around in the wind enough. You're not exercising in the natural environment. Lack of nature is debilitating. Getting out into nature is healing. So, while vigorously defending your spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical health, you strip away the parts of civilization that prevent you from being in touch with yourself and your environment, and defend the strengths of that you naturally have in those particular domains that we talked about the other day. spirit, mind, emotions, and body. So instead of using bullets in the rifle, we'll use concepts and facts to load into our focused mind to take aim at the ignorance that keeps us enslaved, if you will. So rather than teach you first about addiction, that would make you weak, sick, or kills you, prevention, come on, other way. Prevention seeks to teach you how to be strong. So,